When a judicial nominee's main qualification isn't integrity or fairness, but blind loyalty, that's not a nomination, that's corruption dressed in a robe. Senator Alex Padilla just called out what he says is one of the most dangerous trends under Donald Trump's watch, stacking the federal bench with extremist ideologues. And this time, he's naming names.
Mr. President, I ask that we suspend the quorum call.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, what we've seen happening to the federal judiciary over the last 9 months is beyond concerning. It's corrupting. We've seen nominees who are deeply partisan and deeply ideological. We've seen nominees who, under any other administration, would be roundly criticized and rejected by this body. And we've seen nominees whose chief qualification is nothing other than loyalty to and relationship to Donald Trump. So later today, we're going to consider just the latest example of this when the Senate takes up the nomination of Eric Tong to serve on the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. This is a lifetime appointment to the federal bench, colleagues. An appellate court nominee in particular should have the judgment, the independence, and the respect for precedent worthy of the position. But instead, Mr. Tong, the nominee before us, is not here because of his independence or his judicial temperament. He's here because of his ideology. Mr. Tong embraces an extreme and rigid view of the Constitution that rejects both equality and liberty. He's made clear that under his constitutional philosophy, there's no protection for rights that most Americans take as fundamental, including the rights to reproductive freedom, marriage equality, and even private consensual relationships. That's not constitutional interpretation. It's a radical blueprint for rolling back decades of progress on individual freedom and equality. Now, when I gave Mr. Tong an opportunity to explain his history of sexist and anti-labor comments a few months ago in committee during the confirmation hearing, he deflected. He showed no reflection or evolved thinking, because the truth is Mr. Tong's record and writings reveal a pattern of ideological extremism that calls into question his ability to apply the law fully and fairly. Now, let me also make clear that I'm not setting out with the goal of denying the Ninth Circuit of qualified replacements. Far from it. Not just myself, but Senator Schiff, my colleague from California, and I both reached out to the White House months ago to inform them of a couple of things. Number one, that Eric Tong would be unacceptable. But importantly, it's important for my colleagues on the other side of the aisle to understand, we signaled a willingness to consider more mainstream Republican candidates who President Trump had previously nominated for district court judgeships. We were willing to try to find that common ground. But clearly the White House wasn't interested, because whether it's the Department of Justice, the FBI, U.S. attorneys, or the federal bench, the Trump White House is showing us what they truly care about: unwavering loyalty. So today I'll remind my colleagues that when we reference the judiciary, it's the American people's judiciary. And all the decisions that we make today will affect our justice system, the people's judiciary, for years, if not decades. And for those reasons, Mr. President, I urge all my colleagues to join me in strongly opposing Mr. Tong's nomination. Thank you. I now yield the floor.
When Senator Alex Padilla took the floor, he wasn't just challenging a single judicial nomination, he was drawing attention to a much deeper, more dangerous problem: the systematic politicization of the American judiciary. What he said about Trump's nominee, Eric Tong, isn't just about one man's past statements or his ideological leanings. It's about the erosion of trust in one of the last institutions that's supposed to rise above politics. Padilla's speech reflected what many Americans have been sensing for years: that the courts are no longer being shaped to serve justice, but to serve power. He laid it bare. Eric Tong wasn't nominated because of his judicial expertise or his reputation for fairness. He was nominated because of his loyalty to Donald Trump. And when the measure of a judge becomes political allegiance instead of constitutional principle, that's when democracy begins to rot from the inside. Let's pause for a second and really think about what that means. These judges aren't appointed for a few years. They serve for life. The rulings they hand down today will define what freedom means for decades to come. They'll decide what rights women have over their own bodies, whether workers can organize and demand fair treatment, whether marginalized communities are protected under the law, or left to fend for themselves. And Padilla wasn't speaking in hypotheticals. He directly called out Tong's history of sexist and anti-labor comments. That matters because judges interpret laws that affect women's rights in the workplace, cases of discrimination, and collective bargaining. If someone already shows contempt for equality or workers' rights before they even put on the robe, what kind of justice can we expect once they're on the bench? Padilla also made a critical point that went beyond party lines: that he and his Democratic colleagues had been open to compromise. They were willing to consider more moderate Republican nominees. That shows this isn't about partisanship, it's about basic integrity. But instead of choosing balance, the Trump White House doubled down on extremism. This is the same pattern we've seen over and over again: an effort to tilt the scales of justice permanently. By filling lifetime positions with loyalists, you ensure that even after an administration is gone, its influence lingers through the courts. Every ruling, every decision, every interpretation of the Constitution carries the fingerprints of political loyalty instead of impartial reasoning. And that's the point Padilla was making. The danger isn't just in who gets appointed, it's in the precedent it sets. Because once we accept that judges can be chosen for ideology rather than fairness, once we let political loyalty become the price of admission to the federal bench, then justice stops being blind. It becomes selective. It becomes conditional. That's not what the judiciary was meant to be. The courts are supposed to be the guardrail of democracy, the one institution that upholds the law even when political power tries to bend it. But when that institution is captured by politics, everything else crumbles. The rights we take for granted start to feel fragile. The idea of equality before the law becomes negotiable. Padilla's message was both a warning and a plea, that the judiciary belongs to the people, not to one man, one administration, or one party. Because what's being decided here isn't just one nomination. It's whether the next generation of Americans can rely on the courts to defend them, rather than rule against them. And that's why his speech matters. It's not about Eric Tong alone. It's about what kind of justice system we want to leave behind. Do we want a judiciary that protects power, or one that protects people? This is the question Padilla wants America to start asking before it's too late. If you found this breakdown insightful, make sure you're subscribed to Left Lens, where we don't just replay the speeches, we unpack the meaning behind them. Because understanding the stakes is the first step to changing them.